Hey trekkers, we're going to look at my 2019 trip to Mammoth Caves National Park. This trip to Mammoth Cave was on 23 to 25 May in 2019. This trip was done over Memorial Day weekend, which generally kicks off the start of summer. The initial intent was to do another backpacking trip with Arlo, but due to a medical concern, we had to board him while we went on the trek ourselves. The plan was to head into the park and do the tour caves first. We wanted to get a guided tour and see those miles of underground caves and find out what makes this place special. Then, the next day, we'd take off for the backpacking trip, which we'll do over 2 days. The difficult and frustrating element of this trip was the planning, specifically the designated campsites. Recreation.gov didn't have the primitive campsites on their website. We were able to book the cave tour there, but the site only listed campgrounds and picnic areas. The primitive campsites required reservations day of, which means we had to do a little planning in advance. We had to also look at alternative campsites in the event that the ones we were looking at for our trek were reserved by other people from the previous day or the day of. We weren't looking to do anything long distances to campsite, especially with Arlo with us. We planned between 6 to 10 miles with him. But personally, when we like to hike, we like to take our time and enjoy the scenery, so we generally aim between 10 and 12 miles. On the first day, we were able to explore the caves. The temperatures were warm with some humidity. It wasn't as bad as it is in Florida, but we followed the group down the road to the cave entrance, and the temperatures began to drop, and it felt much cooler than what it once was. The park rangers gave a pre-brief before we started because the caves are restrictive in some areas, and it does take some time to do the tour. There are no easy exits, so if you can't maneuver around some of the tight areas, you might be out of luck. The rangers do suggest some people not come along if they're claustrophobic, and the travelers should be physically able to do the exploration. Overall, the cave tour was really cool. I was so fascinated that there were so many vast areas and sections all underground. What blew my mind the most was how many people and from how far back people explored it. The terrain was challenging with boulders, rocks, and sections, and we had technology like lights, headlamps, and sturdy clothes. People did this for centuries before this even became a park. There were also signs of Native Americans down there and various people from the 1800s. You could see on the ceiling and the walls of burn marks from torches, even tagged areas from people signing in the past. I'm talking like the 1800s. There was even an underground river. That's how big this place was. The next day we took off on our trip to do the backpacking portion. We got our passes and headed down to the trailhead. The first mistake I made was not trusting the online posted maps. There was a caution at the time about our washed out bridge and alternative routes to the trailhead road. The map had listed a ferry on the river, and I thought there'd be one there. While we took our initial route to get to the trailhead, when we got to the open section where the ferry would be, nothing was there. I was frustrated to say the least, but I turned around and took the alternative route. Another frustrating element was my GPS kept telling me to go back the road we just left from, even though it wasn't an option. About 30 minutes later, we arrived to the other side of the park and were finally able to park the car. After we parked the car, we got our gear ready, we signed the trail ledger, and headed on our way. Our destination was Camp Ferguson. The map showed the distance to camp was about 9.4 miles, and then the second day, to complete the loop, around the north side, it would have been 8.4 miles to return to the car. I'm not sure what was more accurate, but my phone's GPS marked it as 13.5 miles for the first day and 10.8 miles for the second day. To this day, I'm not sure what we actually did. Okay, here we go. Notes about the trail. So the first thing I want to note about the trail was the temperature. It was hot. Maybe not fiery hot, but it was definitely humid. There are a few photos of me sweating. We were thankful that there was tree coverage and canopies that block out the sun from overhead. But with that dense forest, there was no gusts of wind or breeze of any kind. The heat didn't stop us from enjoying the trail though. The second note was all the spider webs. It's nature, so there's going to be bugs, but holy smokes. I walked into so many spider webs. At one point, I started using my trekking poles like the karate chop in front of me and knock down the webs. Then I finally wised up and put on my bug net. The bug net definitely did help, but it didn't help me feeling cooler. There was a humidity that was kind of building up inside that net, and anytime I took it off, it just felt a lot cooler. But the bug net also protected my head from the rampant mosquitoes. We did bring bug repellent, but that would always wash off from all the sweating, so we had to reapply it frequently. Third note, on the subject of bugs, there were a lot of ticks. A lot. I think after the first hour we stopped, we already discovered like 3 ticks on our person, and throughout the trek we continued to pick up more. I was worried about contracting Lyme disease, but I continually check and pull the suckers off as soon as I could. I didn't get any photos, but at one point I think I had 5 ticks underneath my socks. Fourth note was the muddy trails. Holy cow. I've seen muddy trails before, but this was ridiculous. I really should have taken some photos, but basically horses are allowed on the trail, and there are sections where they pass through, and it's almost like they purposely stomped around and had them make the ground very massive and super muddy and like a giant pit. The muddy sections were very difficult to get through, just because how long, wide, and deep the mud was. I mean, you could lose your shoes in them, and we did. I feel like we could have gotten to the trail faster if it wasn't for all those mud pits, and there were a lot of them. It was incredible how much we slowed down just from the mud. Alright, so the fifth and final note I want to talk about is the trash. Nothing against the horseback riders that were out there, but we did come across some that were drinking, and some definitely did not have regard for the location. People were tossing beer cans and leaving trash. Hell, even our campsite we stayed at had trash. We were able to pack out some, but some of it was just too large for us to carry out. I'm talking like buckets and makeshift chairs. It's just a real shame that what people do out there, and there's just a lot of dirt bags, and you just gotta look out for them. Okay, on to lessons learned. Excess gear. If any of you watched my past videos, you can guess it. The bear can. I brought this sucker again. Once again, I was training to carry it, but also partially I didn't have any other ditty bag or sacks to put the food in. At this point in time, it was just easier for me to carry the bear can. Another excessive gear was a hammock. Although it wasn't wasted, Nikki does like to use the hammock, and we didn't use it for sleeping, but we did use it at camp while we're just taking a load off our feet and relaxing. Something I wish we brought, or not in this case, prepared for, was using bug spray. We did bring bug spray to apply on us in our clothing, but what I mean specifically is permethrin, that spray that's applied to your clothes and your gear and your tent. It's supposed to repel ticks, mosquitoes, and other bugs. I really wish I applied this stuff before we went out on the trip. The ticks were relentless, and we pulled off so many. Finally, when we got back to the car, we stripped off our dirty clothes, put them in a trash bag, then we pulled off more ticks, and then changed into fresh clothes. So to other trekkers out there, be mindful and keep in mind about the ticks in the area. Overall, this trip was a lot of fun. There was definitely some challenges with the steep climbs and the rocks, and especially the mud pits. But I'd like to try this trip again and do some different, if not longer, routes. This trip may have had some difficult portions, but that's what makes the journey much more enjoyable. It's overcoming those obstacles. But in the end, we still had a great time. Like always, thanks again for watching, and enjoy the trails.